there are few figures more polarizing in the NFL than the guy we're talking about today. He is the new quarterback for the Washington Commanders, Carson Wentz. But before he even plays a snap this fall, guys, a couple questions still remain. What does a successful season look like for Carson Wentz in DC? Does the media have it all wrong about Wentz? It's time to finally set the record straight about the curious case of Carson Wentz. Now let's get on with today's video. Whether or not it's Philadelphia, Indy, or now Washington, everybody's got an opinion about Carson Wentz. And today we are diving into it. Welcome to the Sidelines Washington YouTube channel, everybody. Of course, I'm your head of NFL operations for the Silence Sports Network, where we take command for the SSN, Parker Hamlet. Click the link tree in the description, people, if you are not familiar with our podcast, the Silence Washington podcast, where I come to you guys weekly with a bunch of great guests and exclusive interviews talking all things Commanders for the Sideline Sports Network. And of course, here on the YouTube channel, make sure you guys subscribe and turn on notifications like it says in the intro. But like I said, everybody's got an opinion about Carson Wentz, guys, whether, it'd be his dynamic and sometimes foolish play style, his exodus is from, of course, a couple of different franchises, only 5 years into his career. My opinion of Carson Wentz definitely isn't a secret. And, that's probably why some of you guys are watching this, because it's a very poorly kept one. But if you know, you know. But today we are setting the record straight on what to expect from QB1 and everything that has followed him. So how did Carson Wentz get to the nation's capital? Well, he was, of course, taken with a top 3 selection by the Philadelphia Eagles, part of a huge, and I mean huge, Donald Trump voice, trade package, said to be the savior, the franchise quarterback from North Dakota State. And he was certainly on an MVP pace back in 2017, but he tragically tore his ACL. Nick Foles took over, and of course, the rest was history. One of my biggest concerns with Carson Wentz is, was one of my biggest concerns with players in general. And if you listen to the podcast, you know that. I always say you're only as good as you are available. And I've always said that Carson Wentz is a very injury-prone quarterback. We've had plenty of time to watch this guy throughout the years, guys. He was in the division. But, after the 2017 injury, he was never really quite the same. But the injury history, of course, the torn ACL that I just mentioned, 2018, he had vertebrae fractures. 2019, he got a huge payday, even with all the issues on the field leading up before then, because it was still seen as, quote-unquote, his team. But it got a $128 million deal after 16 games, and he got his first postseason start. It looks like things were looking up. Looks like they were on that 2017 trajectory. No, 9 snaps into the playoff game, he had a concussion on a quote-unquote dirty hit. And then 2020, big year for Carson Wentz. Led the league in interceptions, sacks taken, and total turnovers. And on just to put the cherry on top, was benched only 12 games in for the guy who's still there now, Jalen Hurts. So with Carson Wentz, of course, being a very polarizing figure, he has a lot of apologists. A lot of people bring up the offensive line. Well, Parker, in 2020, when, he had that record bad year, the offensive line was in shambles. He had no 1,000-yard receivers. And then, of course, it's but 2017. And whether or not it be injury history, for me, it's locker room concerns with Carson Wentz. And that's something that I've been very public about. It's something that I've always followed throughout his career. And it's another big reason that I climbed him as much as I did. But personally, I have no idea who Carson Wentz is a person. He certainly passes the eye tests, but all I can go off of is the facts. What teammates have actually said about Carson Wentz. Of course, you've had a lot of teammates come out and say he's great. Darius Leonard, Lane Johnson. But if you know how the NFL works, you know that no one's going to publicly come out unless they got some pull and condemn one of their teammates. Because, locker rooms are their own living, breathing organisms, and quarterback, of course, being a very important position in that locker room. You don't want to rock the boat. You got people trying to earn contract as well. So, obviously, make what you will of those endorsements, but the condemnations are the things that I want to focus on. You had LeGarrette Blount on Brian Mitchell's show. Brian Mitchell, that's a name a lot of you guys should be familiar with, discussing how Carson and Darren Sproles got into a spat, during their Super Bowl run back in 2017. Just Google it, guys. It's there. You had Malcolm Jenkins, a very established part of the NFL, part of the NFLPA, said that the Eagles protected Carson's ego way too much.
Is there an issue with Wentz in that locker room? We keep on hearing about it. You were there when there was a a magazine article locally that came out said there was a big problem with Wentz and players in that locker room. Is there an issue? Is there any there about Carson Wentz that you can share with us, Malcolm?
Well, I think, as a teammate and friend of Carson's, I think that, it always starts right with performance. And he hadn't performed up to, I think, the expectations that everybody's had for him. And I don't think he would say he's played up to his own expectations. But some of the other issues that I felt, when I was in the locker room was just that, there was just too much leeway. And it didn't make him a better player. I don't think they did him any favors by, trying to kind of protect his ego or trying to.
And, Doug Peterson, who's had quote unquote glowing endorsements of Carson Wentz. And of course, according to Coach Rivera, apparently said, Carson, he got glowing endorsement from Peterson, dating back to Carson's time in Philly. But teammates and people multiple times have reported that he was a very hard person to work with in regards to coaching. A lot of people calling him selfish. Play calling was a very big issue. He was very uncompromising. Said Carson had favorites. And I think we all know who that is. And he plays tight end for the Arizona Cardinal now, Zach Ertz. And, as far as the hard to coach thing, if I can only go off what players have said, I can also go off of what actual NFL legendary quarterbacks have to say about his play style. And watch Kurt Warner's breakdown on Carson Wentz and, the instant of his run with Indianapolis Colts. He condemns Carson for being pigeon-toed, his throwing motion. He said that Carson tries to make the big throws instead of the right throws. Says that Carson is very bad with his eyes. And when your eyes are all over the place, it tells me that you don't know what you're looking at. That's coming from a guy with a yellow jacket, Kurt Warner, and he takes ridiculous sacks instead of getting rid of the ball. But let's not be mistaken, right? It's very easy to listen to this video and say that I'm obviously not a part of the Wentz wagon, which I'm not, but I am a Commanders fan. Obviously I got the gear. You guys know I live, eat, and breathe it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Carson Wentz doesn't have some great attributes. I mean, he has an NFL arm, NFL athleticism, and he says all the right things at the podium. He passes all the eye tests. But at the end of the day, he's in his third city in 5 years for a reason, guys. And, we've discussed his time in Philly, but Carson was traded with his $128 million in all to the Indianapolis Colts last season, where he had a Frank Reich reunion. And, of course, Frank stuck his neck out for him. Guys, go watch Hard Knocks. It tells you everything you need to know about how Frank Reich feels about Carson Wentz. They have shared faith, which at the end of the day really has nothing to do with football, no matter what you got to say about it.
We're driving back over to the facility, and I just decided to go jump in his truck so just get a few more minutes of kind of one-on-one time. And as we started driving, I just mentioned to him that in a previous interview, I just thought he, in a very mature way, handled the questions about his faith and how he connected faith and football. And then I quoted a verse to him, 1 Peter 3:15. And when we pulled up to the facility, he gave me his cell phone and said, "Look at my screensaver." And he actually had that Bible verse on his screensaver. That's where we connected on a personal level.
And of course, people, like to parallel Wentz's decline in Philadelphia to Reich's departure, saying that these two were going to make that 2017 magic, capture lightning in a bottle. But that was wrong. The Colts failed to make the playoffs, losing to the worst team in the NFL to close out the year. But Parker, they haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014. Guys, check the film. Warner states that the mistakes that Carson made in his departure from Indy are mistakes that you simply cannot make at this point in your career if you want to remain a starting quarterback in the National Football League. And, as far as his time in Indianapolis, our fan base has become weirdly opposed to Colts management and Colts fan base, with their decision to swiftly, move on from Carson Wentz after only one season. That's weirdo energy, man. I mean, this is a business. Reputation follows you. It's the same thing in real life. Of course, he threw 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Guys, he had the best running back in football, and I would argue and say he's the best offensive line of football too, and he was a top 3 selection in 2017. This is how Carson should play at the end of the day. This should be a normal routine stat line for him. And, a lot of you wanted Kirk out of town, and we haven't had a quarterback throw 29 touchdowns, 30 in my entire lifetime. Ever since I've been alive, 25 years, the bar is that low here. But it shouldn't be so low that you cannot call a spade, guys. But what does a good season look like for Carson Wentz? What are my, expectations for him over that stat line in Indianapolis? If we have an amazing wide receiving core here, which we do, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas at tight end. You got some of those newer young guys. You got a revamp offensive line with 2 veteran guards now. For me, 30 touchdowns is the minimum for Carson Wentz. All these Wentz enthusiasts will tell you that, he is the elite quarterback that we haven't had in so long. And if he didn't have any weapons in the Indy, well, he has them now. His offensive line really isn't that much of a decrease either. I really could care less about projecting his passing yards. I mean, that doesn't automatically replicate to a good offense. I mean, look at Matt Ryan with the Atlanta Falcons. But Alex Smith led this organization to a playoff berth on one leg back in 2020. So Wentz should have no problem doing so. He's still, some people say he's a veteran, but he's still relatively early in his career. And, he's trying to prove that he still belongs. So a successful season for Carson Wentz in 2020 is 30 touchdowns and a playoff berth for the former top overall pick in the draft class. Like I said, 27 touchdowns with the measly Colts isn't an issue, then it shouldn't be, a problem with the mighty Commanders get 30 in a playoff berth in this absolute joke of a division. And, some people sit here and say that I'm being harsh, right? The Commanders do have the ability to get out of the deal after 1 year. You'll have some people saying, well, he's an upgrade over Heineke. Well, no shit that he's an upgrade over Heineke. I would hope that a top 3 overall pick would be an upgrade over an undrafted quarterback out of ODU who was taking classes when the team called him, a COVID quarterback. But the thing is, Taylor's already playing with house money. Taylor's already exceeded everything that anybody thought he was capable of, what the NFL thought he was capable of. But the thing is, this time next year, they could both be out of the NFL. And remember this video if that does happen. But if Carson comes in, lights it up, and becomes the guy we need, no one, and I mean nobody, will be happier than me. I was extremely enthusiastic about Alex Smith's bare-ass quarterback play on one leg in 2020. I would love for Carson to be everything that everybody's telling me that he is. But I will honestly be surprised if he actually makes it the whole season. But I could be wrong. If Carson Wentz sets the world on fire in 2022, I will be the first person to buy a Wentz jersey and literally upload an apology video. But guys, we have to do better. You're putting Commander Carson on a pedestal. He has not played a snap. He has not played a down. Reputation follows you. Reckless play style gets you kicked out of organizations. And at the end of the day, we need the long-term answer at the quarterback position. This is a 1 to 2 year fix for the Washington Commanders. We have stacked quarterback classes coming up, possible veteran options. Carson wouldn't have even came here if he had the choice, guys. That's another thing. I hate to rain on your parade if you're, praising Commander Carson. But at the end of the day, guys, we have to be realistic with ourselves so we don't eventually get disappointed like we're really used to. But will Carson Wentz come in and rewrite everything that I just said about him? That is yet to be seen. But, I want a legitimate quarterback. I want somebody to pass for 30 touchdowns in my lifetime. I've learned to be cautiously optimistic. I wouldn't even say cautiously optimistic, actually. I've learned to be a realist. And, it is up to Carson Wentz and Carson Wentz alone to prove that Philadelphia, Indy, and all of his doubters are wrong in 2022. I won't crown him yet, and you shouldn't either. But what does a good season look like for Carson Wentz in 2022 with the Commanders? Comment below what his stat line would need to be or what he would need to accomplish in order for you guys to give him another season in the nation's capital. But thank you for checking out the Sidelines Washington YouTube channel, of course. Make sure you guys subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out the podcast. Link tree in the description to find everything, including social media. But until next time, catch you guys later. Peace.